You think that this is money, but this is actually debt. In today's episode, we'll unpack how we transition from settling transactions with gold and silver to settling with these paper currencies and why we refer to them as debt. Sanbonani, Dumelani. Welcome to another episode of The Money Revolution, the podcast where we empower one another to build wealth through the sharing of information and ideas about how money actually works. In our previous episode, we defined what money is and how it naturally emerges in a market economy. We also touched on the 4 properties that money needs to exhibit, which is it has to be a store of value, it is a medium of exchange, it is a unit of account, and most importantly, it is also durable. We also talked about how trade naturally transitioned from the barter system to using beads and shells, and to eventually using gold and silver as money. The very first emergence of gold and silver coins in trade settlements was in modern-day Turkey around 550 BC. This use of gold and silver as money resulted in a very huge explosion of trade in that specific part of the world. This was the first evidence that gold and silver were a good standard for money. However, a new challenge emerged. Remember, back in the days, people used to travel to marketplaces by either foot or camel. So carrying a heavy metal like gold or silver became a bit burdensome. Goldsmiths then began to solve this burden by offering a solution. They did so by providing storage services to people who owned gold coins, and they would issue a certificate of how much gold or silver the trader had in storage. Holding a certificate was as good as holding either gold or silver. Storehouse certificates then emerged as a solution to carrying heavy metal because traders would simply exchange certificates with each other in settling transactions. This was the beginning of the banking system as we know it today. However, what was being banked then was either gold or silver. Effectively, the storehouse owed the certificate holder the amount of gold reflecting on the certificate. Now, can you see how the paper certificate was actually evidence of debt owed by the storehouse to the certificate bearer? This is what we need to understand. In order for these certificates to maintain their value, the number of certificates in issuance must always equal the amount of either gold or silver that is in the storehouse. For example, if one certificate was equivalent to 100 silver coins, then 10 certificates would be equal to 1,000 coins. But if the goldsmith has 1,000 coins, but for whatever reason decides to issue 20 certificates, then each certificate is only worth 50 coins. Now, can you imagine a trader coming into a specific storehouse with a certificate for 100 coins, but only receiving 50 coins?
It's my money and I need it now!
conflict would definitely ensue. So, countries all around the world agreed to what today we call the gold standard, where each certificate was always fixed to a certain amount of gold or silver in reserve. Countries with a lot of gold reserves obviously would have stronger paper currencies. For instance, did you know that at some point South Africa was the world's largest producer of gold with a significant amount of gold reserves? And in 1971, you would only need 68 South African cents to buy $1 American. Yes, only 68 South African cents. All world's paper currencies were backed by gold reserves. In 1971, that all changed.
Is very technical.
Because up until then, all currencies around the world were backed by gold. No country could issue more currency than the value of its gold reserves. Currency worked the same as the gold certificates of old. Even here in South Africa, the currency contained a promise by the Reserve Bank to pay the bearer of that paper the equivalent amount of gold. So you could take a 2 rand note to the Reserve Bank and they would give you 2 rands worth of gold.
Please give me my 2 rands worth of gold.
But in 1971, the US government under President Richard Nixon decided to abandon the gold standard. They refused to allow holders of US paper dollars to exchange them for the equivalent amount of gold.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
From that day onward, paper currency was no longer backed by gold reserves in the United States of America. In time, every country stopped backing their currency with gold. This paper currency with no gold backing is what we refer to as fiat currency. Yes, fiat currency. Because even today, this is not backed by anything. Africa, a quick reminder that the paper in your pockets will perish. Gold and silver have stood the test of time. I am protecting my family and our Stokvel savings by accumulating gold and silver coins to ensure that I benefit from the biggest wealth transfer that's coming. Now back to the episode.
The U.S. right now is pursuing bad policies. Central bank is doing a bad job managing their currency. And as a consequence, it's inevitable that the dollar is going to collapse. It's on this road that I call the fiat currency graveyard.
Africa, tell us in the comment section below what you think about the paper in your wallet being dead. That is essentially backed by nothing. If you are interested in understanding more about how money really works, hit the subscribe button below and the notification bell to know when we upload new episodes. And remember, if it's paper, it will perish.